Assalamu alaikum, hello and welcome. I'm Shazia joining you on the Nutrition Show on Unity FM 93.5 FM. I'm really excited to have you all join me today for a discussion on topics related to nutrition, which I hope will serve you, your loved ones, and those that you influence with better health and well-being. So, as always, and before I get into the topic of the day, I want to remind listeners that all the information that you hear on the show today is very general in nature. It's not meant to be specific for anyone in any particular way. If you have any medical issues related or unrelated, please be sure to seek medical advice from your own medical practitioner. Remember, that's what they're there for. They're there to help you. Don't feel overwhelmed. Get in touch and get some advice on what you're concerned about. So today I'm going to be talking about a really important topic, and I guess I've put this off for quite a while, and it perhaps might have been one of the first shows to have done. However, better late than never, and I think it's going to be something that a lot of people are going to find hopefully useful, in that a lot of the information out there is quite sort of difficult to kind of understand sometimes, because it's not always very clear. So I want to sort of just get you looking into things for yourself. I'm not here to sort of tell you what to do. I'm here to educate and to empower you to go and do your own research. And remember, everyone is different, although some basic principles will apply to everyone. So, some of you are going to be struggling with this for yourself. Some of you are going to be struggling with this for your children or other people that you look after. And I think if you can really kind of dive into this and take time on it, you're going to really sort of reap the rewards later on. Even though, to be honest, with nutrition, any beneficial change that you make, your body starts to actually take sort of benefit of straight away. Okay, so it's we say better later than never. That is absolutely true. But the sooner you can get these things started and implemented, the better the kind of results are going to be overall. You want to kind of give yourself the best chance at living the most healthiest life as early as possible, and well into your sort of years of maturity. So, getting to the topic, then I'm going to be talking about sugar. So it's a sweet topic, and a pun intended there. I would really advise you to have a good listen to what I'm trying to kind of point towards, and as I say, your own research, your own kind of knowledge is actually going to be king. Get in there, look into it, and then obviously work with someone if you need more support. So, what is sugar then? So without getting into all the chemistry and the molecular structures and what they are and what they're not, which really is irrelevant, I just want to kind of, give you the basics. And the idea is that what you take away from today, you can actually utilize. So there's no point me educating you, like, you may have had lessons in the past when you were younger or whatever. And you just kind of think, okay, it's a lesson, I just need to hear it, and it's in through one ear and out the other. That's kind of not achieving any objective. So the idea of me speaking about this is to kind of give you some tips and understanding that you can actually implement straight away. So what sugar then is, and these are terms that you may or may not be familiar with, but again, this is all available for you to research yourselves. I will give you the basics. But sugar belongs to the carbohydrate macronutrient family. So when we talk about macronutrients, we're talking about the nutrients that we actually use in large amounts within our body. So macro meaning big, nutrient meaning nutrient. Okay, so these are things that we use, sort of in larger quantities, and carbohydrates are one of them, proteins are the other one, and then fats are your third one. So, the sugars that we consume, they fall into the carbohydrate family. Okay, so is sugar problematic? I'm going to talk about this as I go through the actual sort of show today, and you can see for yourself what I'm kind of alluding to, because you'll see that it's kind of not a very black and white answer, because it depends on the type of sugar, the amount you're consuming, what kinds of problems you already have, etc., etc. There's a whole range of things that we need to look into, and that's what I do in my work when I work with clients in clinic. I try to look at the whole picture, see what's going on, And, as I'll talk about later on, again, there are clients for whom I will take sugar out, sort of immediately, because I feel that, if they were to continue consuming sugars the way they are, it's going to cause a lot of problems going forward. But, this doesn't happen for everyone. The idea is that we do work our way towards eating more wholesome, natural foods. And, as you learn about sugar yourself, you will realize what that means, because, without sort of understanding it from a self-learning perspective, you may not understand what I mean so much just from me saying it. Okay, so we get sugar from naturally occurring foods like milk, fresh fruit, vegetables. Yes, these are all sugar containing. So even though they may not be sweet, it doesn't mean they don't contain sugar. And why do we actually produce this sugar? It's actually to burn in our bodies to then create energy. So carbohydrates are then broken down by enzymes in the body into the smallest unit, which is glucose. So this is what we refer to as sugar when we're talking about it in health. There are other sugars as well. That's not the only sugar, but that's what we're kind of getting as the simplest, basic sort of form of sugar before this sugar goes into our bloodstream. So that's what your gut is going to be absorbing. So from that a banana that you've had, or the sandwich that you've consumed, the bread that you've had, as part of your sandwich. These are all broken down into glucose, which is the simplest unit, sugar unit, that is then absorbed via the gut into the bloodstream. Okay, so we also get sugars which are added to foods from things like sweets, juice, cakes and things, all these kinds of things that you see in the bakery. These are added sugars. They don't normally occur in their natural form. They're added. Obviously, you do get natural sugars that are used as well, but these are products that are made. They're made by man. They're not kind of naturally available. You don't go pick up a cake off the tree, do you? So that's what I mean when I'm talking about added sugars. So this may come as a surprise to you, but chips from those white potatoes that you may make at home or purchase from the local chip shop, or the rice that you have in your favorite biryani, they all contain sugar. So I'm going to say this again: potato and rice will also break down into glucose, into sugar. So you need to understand that even though foods don't taste sweet, as I said before, that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't contain sugar. So you need to understand what they're actually being broken down into. So first of all, understanding what foods are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats is really useful. These are not clear cut, especially when it comes to carbs and proteins. Not all the time, but most of the time. You do find that there are foods which have a combination of macronutrients. So having a general idea about what foods make up which macronutrient, that will help you to understand what you're actually putting into your body. So I do this at home with my mom quite often, and I'll ask her, what proteins have you consumed today? And sometimes she doesn't understand, but so I need to explain to her what is a carbohydrate, what is a protein, what is a fat. So understanding these in general terms, and you can go online, pop it into your browser address, and search carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and you'll find lots and lots of sources of information where you can start to identify the foods that you're consuming. Because without understanding this on a very general, basic level, you'll always struggle to make sure that your plate is balanced. You're going to think, okay, I'm doing the best that I can. I've got this in there and that in there, but actually you're guessing rather than actually knowing. And I taught this in one of my basics workshops, and I found it was a really good place to start, because people started to recognize the foods, and that was really empowering. So that's what you need to do. So I'm going to repeat it again if you missed it just before. Potato and rice contain sugar. Okay, so if you think you're not consuming sugars and you think you're eating healthy and you're having loads of chips and you're having lots of rice, whatever form it is, whether it's a staple of your culture or whatever, think about portion sizes, think about the sugars that you're putting into your body. You need to be having a good estimate of what it is that you're actually consuming. So when you're going for seconds or larger sides, or when you're thinking of, I'll just have a little bit more, this is where it becomes problematic. And I can tell you, I spoke to two ladies not long ago who actually said this to me. They were saying that they were addicted to rice and they couldn't cut the portion sizes down. So this is a big problem, and people in my community, chapatis is another worry and concern. I'm not saying don't consume chapatis if that's what you have at home and that's what your family are consuming. What I'm saying is look at the amount of sugar that you're putting into your body, and if you're combining that sugar with proteins and fats to begin with, and then look at how you can start modifying your diet to actually consume foods that are going to really benefit you. Okay, so this is where the exposure is coming from. And like I said, many times it's exposure that we're not aware of. Okay, if you're a pasta lover, again, think about the sugars that you're putting into your body. That pasta, if it's made up of wheat or the usual stuff, it's going to be breaking down into sugar. Yeah, so we're going to have to be mindful of these foods. Snack bars, syrup, sweetened yogurts, breakfast, fizzy drinks, cakes, alcohol for the people who consume alcohol. Alcohol is also a sugar. It's broken down into sugar. Yeah, it's an alcoholic group, but then it's broken down into sugar. So these are all going to be contributing to the sugar content in our bodies for those who obviously consume, because I'm trying to cater for a larger audience, so I don't know who's going to be listening to this show. So think about alcohol as well, because you may not think of that as a source of food or drink rather that can contribute to sugar. Canned fruits, jams, pickles, syrups, all these kinds of things are going to contribute to your sugar load. Okay. What you need to remember is your body is having to cope with this sugar load. Okay, so we might have had a really good time consuming, that really sweet dessert we had. And when it's a regular thing, that's when it becomes problematic. Now, remember, nutrition isn't about making your life a misery. Believe me, it's not easy, because I'm there and I fall back on myself as well. It's about finding good habits that are going to stick in the most, and again, excuse the pun, but in the most healthiest way. Because if we don't help our bodies right now, wherever we are in our lives, we're going to really struggle. And I say this with, full conviction that, I've seen it in family, I've seen it in friends, I hear about it all the time. When I do my discovery calls, when I run clinics, I see these problems, so I know what's going on. And, and having worked as a pharmacist for 14 years, I saw it then. It's not something that's just going to go away. It's something that we need to be proactive about. It's something that we actually need to take active steps towards, rectifying our health when we know that there's a problem there. So this is the aim of these shows. It's kind of highlighting the issues that are there and then looking for steps that you can put into place to, to kind of really kind of understand what the concern is, so that when you've seen a family member suffer, when you've seen a loved one suffer, a friend, someone, your neighbor, whoever it may be, you can understand what it is that is going wrong, and you can support them in some way. General advice always helps. Again, as I say, this is just for general information, but it's also about preventing that ill health for yourself. Yeah, so you need to take those active steps to do that. So, as I mentioned, sugars are broken down in the body into the simplest units, and for carbohydrates, this is actually glucose. So the body can't distinguish whether that glucose came from, I don't know, a fancy donut or an apple. In the sense of they're both going to be broken down into glucose. Although the apple's going to give you the nutrients, the vitamins, some fiber, you're not going to get that necessarily from the donut. Okay, so that is what I'm trying to say, is it doesn't mean therefore that you can just eat the donut and say, okay, I'm still getting my sugar that I would have got from the apple. No, it doesn't work like that. We want to try and get those additional nutrients that nature has actually provided to us in the forms of foods that are available from the ground, from a tree, from a shrub, whatever it may be, as opposed to what's been produced in a factory, man-made. Okay, so we want to focus on whole foods that are going to be useful for our bodies. Okay, so that's kind of telling you that sugar in and of itself, as a side note at the moment, isn't in and of itself isn't a bad thing. It's just the way we're choosing to consume sugars and the types that we're consuming, and lots of other factors, as I mentioned. Okay, so you're going to get your energy boost, from both, but you have to kind of think to yourself, which one would I prefer? And yes, I understand that it's pretty addictive to go for the donut as opposed to the apple. But this is where you've got to work on your palate. So what I say to people is it's about unlearning the flavors and then relearning them. And it's very much about how my education was. So I had to unlearn some of the things I learned before, then I had to relearn. And actually, it took me a step even further. So it was never about kind of dismissing what I knew. It was about building on it. So that's what we need to do. We need to kind of build on the learning that we've already achieved. So what can you do then to help yourself? As I mentioned, education is key. And I've mentioned it in several times, over several times in shows previously. But this is where being label literate is really going to pay dividends. What do I mean by that? Understanding what's on a label. So when you're picking up some item of food from the supermarket or wherever you are, read the label. I know you're going to say, I'm rushed, I haven't got time, I don't even have time for myself, I can't do this, I can't do that. Choose a day or a time when you're not so rushed, perhaps, when it's kind of like something that you can dedicate to yourself for the benefit of yourself and your family, and take some time out to read a label. There are courses available online that actually help you with label literacy, and I think there are nutritional therapists who are doing education of this type. It's something that we would do as well, but it's so valuable because it's going to put you a step ahead of the game. Because if you start to be able to look at a label and say, yeah, that's good for me, that's not good for me, that's good for my family, etc., you're going to be really, you're going to be on your way to better health without a doubt. And this is not just about reading the traffic light information on the front, which is actually really useful, that snapshot that you get. But this is about taking it a step further, looking at the kind of the content of the label. Now, I understand that this is going to probably be a little bit advanced for some of you, but for those of you who can do this, it's actually really useful. So, think of you guys out there. I mean, I don't know if there are any teenagers listening, any sort of, people who've got like a bit more free time, perhaps help out with your family. Try and do this, make it a part of your learning. So as you go to school and learn something, put some time aside for your own, your nutrition, and look out for these kinds of courses and things that you can attend, and invest in yourself, because that's what you're doing. If you can read a label, that's a great achievement. You can start to look at the amounts of sugars that are in foods, the amount of protein, the carbs, how nutritious they are from a sort of a whole perspective. You'll start to pick this up as you make a start. And it's something that I'm learning all the time. So if I can do it, anyone can do it. So start somewhere and make this an investment for yourself. Now, why is this really important with sugar? Because if you look online, I mean, I just did a search on the one site. Sugar is actually known under 56 different names. Okay, so if you missed that, sugar is known under 56 different names. So a lot of these I can't even pronounce. I mean, I know with my pharmacy degree, we had a lot of drug names that were really hard to pronounce. And that's still ongoing, because you get the same with the phytochemicals and all sorts of nutrients and pathways, etc., in nutrition as well, because it's a science. Some of the names are really difficult to pronounce, and I would say for all of you listening to me today, if you go online at some point today or within the week, put it on your to-do list and actually go and read the names of sugar. Okay, so why? Because it's going to make you it's going to give you the education, the empowerment to then go and look for foods with some of these names in there. You might not recognize them all straight away, and I'm not saying stand in an aisle and go through each label with sugar in there. Just start to familiarize yourself with it so that you know what kinds of food ingredients are going into that item that you're buying. I mean, would you not want to know what you're putting into your body? How often is it that we want to know, what goes into our into our bank accounts, what's going out, some everything we want to know. I mean, when you're putting fuel into your car, you wouldn't go and put in the wrong fuel into your car, would you? I mean, these are just very poor examples, but you can see that, you want to know what's going on. You don't want to be blind to what's sort of being put into your food, because at the end of the day, you're fueling your body with that. Your body is repairing itself with what you're putting in, if it can. It's actually using those nutrients, if it can, to kind of get you sort of to your next level of health. Now, if you're an athlete, for example, and you're putting in foods that are not beneficial, are you going to be able to achieve your goals? You're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to have that level of performance that you're going to be expected to achieve. So think about it in that way. I mean, if you're, say, you're a young parent and you're bringing up children, are you gonna want good health when they're like in their teens and in their 20s, and see them get married and settled? How are you going to do that in a healthy way if you don't look after yourself now? Do you want to be a great grandparent? These are all dreams that we all have as human beings. These are all wishes that most of us will have. How are we going to get there if we're not going to look after ourselves? I really want to make you, think about this. So those 56 names, I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and these are just a handful I've taken from this 56. So like I said, go online and have a look at these names, and you recognize some of them, you probably won't recognize most of them. So golden syrup, yeah, agave nectar, molasses, maltodextrin, rice syrup, dextrose, fructose, sucrose, and one that comes up time and time again when I'm reading about nutritional sort of based articles, or sort of trying to increase my knowledge. High fructose corn syrup. This is a really good one to look into, and you'll see it in a number of foods. So like I said, this is just a few of the 56. It pays to actually go and read and find out what these components are, and then you can even start, you want to take it a step further. You can even start looking at what these ingredients do in your body. I wouldn't get obsessive about it, because remember, the idea is wholesome, whole food eating. That's what you can kind of go back to. Yeah, if it's come out the ground, great. If it's grown on a tree, great. If it's in a packet and it's been cooked 5 times over, then you want to start thinking about what you're trying to consume and why. Okay, so this is where it starts to get important. Okay, so just before I go on, I mean, I'm due for a break shortly, but just to kind of highlight before you sort of start thinking, oh, I'm worried about this, or I'm concerned about that, which is understandable. This is all general advice for you. It doesn't constitute any medical advice whatsoever. I'm not qualified to do that. I wouldn't do that even in my role as a nutritional therapist or as a pharmacist. This is about educating and informing you as a listener, and hoping that you will share this information far and wide, because that's why I'm doing this. I have an extreme passion for educating people and empowering them once I can do that for myself, because I like to pass things on to people in an easy, understandable way. If you have any concerns, you're worried about anything, like I said, you should be tapping into your medical services, speaking to your doctor, discussing your concerns early on, rather than waiting and getting all anxious and worried about them. Remember, they're there to help you, and this is just for education. Okay, so as a side note then, and it's a really interesting question, which I did kind of find the answer to, but it's not necessary to discuss this here, is whether we actually need carbs. So when I talk about carbs, I'm talking about sugars. So, I'm not talking about the fibers and the starches. I'm talking about the sugars specifically. Even though, again, with carbs, you can get a mixture. So what is the point? What is the point of sugar, and what do we need it? What does it benefit us? How do we sort of move forward now that we know that this particular subset of carbohydrates can be a problem? Okay, so sugar, like I said, is broken down into glucose. This is then used by every cell in the body for energy, as I mentioned. And the brain actually consumes 20%. It's quite a large proportion of all of this energy that's actually produced. So, the brain is a highly active organ. It's on the go all the time. It requires a lot of energy. So, because the brain consumes a lot of energy, again, it goes back to what I said earlier. That doesn't justify us eating lots of refined sugars. It doesn't mean that just my brain needs energy, I'm going to go for my favorite chocolate bar. It doesn't justify that. It's about looking at, okay, I need to fuel my brain. What's the most the healthiest foods I can provide to my brain to get efficient functioning, clarity, good performance in my work, being mindful of what I do, good, just having that really good sort of day in, day out function. Yeah. So I mentioned, kids at school on my last show. You want to be feeding them good food for their brain, and and for other organ systems as well. So the brain being one of the most important. So it's about looking, as I mentioned, at different types of the different factors that are involved. Okay, so if you didn't hear this on a previous show, what happens to sugars then when we consume them is that once they're broken down, by the time they get to the gut, we get this spike in sugar levels as the glucose now starts to enter the bloodstream, and as the blood sugar rises, this needs to be brought down because our body maintains what we know as a homeostatic level, meaning that there's a particular level, a range of blood sugar that our bodies will work within to keep us sort of, at the best level of health. So it's enough to give us what we need for energy, but also, it keeps us safe from the harmful effects of sugar in the blood, because we don't want sugar floating around in the blood at high levels unnecessarily. We don't need that. Okay, so as these blood sugar levels rise, insulin is released. That's the hormone that actually pulls glucose into the cells to bring the levels back down, because we need to get them to that homeostatic level. So insulin will rise, bring the sugar back into the muscles and into storage, and basically those levels will drop again to where they should have been prior to you consuming that sugar level, providing that it was kind of normal to begin with, that you weren't suffering a hypo. Okay, so this is the kind of the normal process that happens. Now, if you continue to consume refined sugars, you get these spikes over and over again. So you get the spike and the fall, the spike and the fall, the spike and the fall. You get this kind of what we refer to as the blood sugar roller coaster. Now, this is problematic because you'll be energized and then you'll crash, then you're energized and then you crash, and you go through this horrible cycle over the course of the day that this is actually happening. And this is what you don't want to be doing. You want this blood sugar level to remain constant throughout the day, so you can think well, you can feel well, you don't feel irritated, you don't feel like you're going mad. You want this kind of very constant blood sugar level. And this is why when I talk about my my kind of tips on maintaining good nutrition and looking after yourself, it's about having that protein and that fat in your meal to actually allow for this balance to be achieved. So if you haven't listened to a show before, listen out for a repeat, and you'll find that that's kind of the key to managing blood sugar, alongside looking at the kinds of sugars that you consume in the first place. Okay, so this is kind of the normal way that things should be happening. Now, as you know, if you know a diabetic, or you're diabetic yourself, or you read about diabetes, or you're pre-diabetic, whatever it may be, or you know a friend maybe, you'll know that this is something that goes wrong for them. Okay, so there are mechanisms behind it. I don't need to sort of discuss that with you today, but the idea is that blood sugar balance isn't quite right anymore, and obviously you've got different types of diabetes as well. And this is something that you'll see in a diabetic. You'll see when they're not well. I know, one of my uncles was a diabetic, and when he passed away, I really do miss him. When he passed away, may God grant him Jannah. I mean, he was in a really bad state, diabetes wise. I mean, he had ulceration to his legs, to the point where they were just weeping. It was just, it was, I mean, when I think about it now, it makes me so sad when I think about him. He was in such a bad way. He just could not control his blood sugar. He was on insulin. He was on medicines as well, tablets, and his diabetes was very, very bad. And this, unfortunately, there are people who are living like this, and it was such a sad thing to see. I mean, I used to try and educate him on things. At the time, I wasn't a nutritionist, I was just a pharmacist. But, even with my pharmacist knowledge, I tried to support him, but he just could not get out. He had difficult circumstances, which I know aggravated the situation. But I'm just trying to say that there are people who are living like this. The damage that sugars will do to blood vessels, the macrovascular and the microvascular, complications that we see. So macrovascular meaning cardiovascular issues, and then the microvascular meaning, damage to your eyes, to your kidneys, to your nerves. These are all things that we really need to be mindful of. We don't want to go there. It's not a good experience at all. And it's so sad when you see a family member with this. I mean, I lost my uncle, I think, 12 years ago, and I can't forget those images that I saw. I can't forget them. So it makes me so upset when I think about it. And I wouldn't want anyone to go through what I saw him go through. So please, try and understand why we talk about this. It's not to make your life a misery. It's to make you understand that, look, there is work to be done. Our bodies aren't just going to look at, we need to feed ourselves. Our bodies aren't going to do it for themselves. We can't generate things automatically. We need to provide our bodies with the nutrients that God has provided us with on this earth that we live on. And there's so much that we can do. So I mentioned cardiovascular diseases, is something that we see in clinic. And, we do look at sugar control to support with good outcomes of cardiovascular health. Okay. So, we know that sugar is a big part of the Western diet. We know that most of us get far too much. And, we need to start thinking about what is it that we can actually start to do to basically manage this before it becomes even worse than it is. Okay, so there's so many of us who think that it's only sugar that gets us into trouble, but actually, did you know excess sugar is stored as fat? So while we're thinking that, oh, this person eats a lot of butter, for example, and that's why they're fat, actually sugars can do the same thing. So it's not fat necessarily that makes you fat. Yeah, so that's a really good one to look into if you're doing some research on fat. Sugar will also have the same effect. Okay, so think about sugars as a potential problem until you've actually scrutinized them. So look at the links to obesity. I educate people in my clinics about inflammation all the time. So, how does sugar contribute to inflammation? So if you look at a lot of the chronic diseases, all if not most of them have an inflammatory basis. Okay, so what we need to start then looking at is what's causing or contributing to, or what could be, aggravating this inflammation. Yeah, so this is when I start to look at the sugar intake that people actually, are kind of subjecting themselves to, because you need to really look at that. It's underrated. It's something that's actually really, really beneficial to actually look at. It's one of the first things I do on an assessment, because the outcomes are incredible once you can actually bring that under control and manage it. Yeah. Other conditions, I'm not going to go into them. Lots is in the research, chronic problems that we see. Think about dementias, how is sugar related to dementia? There are many, many other chronic conditions as well, which, research is showing potentially a link with. Yeah. So again, look at the research. What are they telling us to do to help support ourselves from actually preventing these conditions? Because prevention is better than cure by far. Okay. So what should you do then? What should you do? Should you go cold turkey? Should you just like be miserable and say, oh, I can never have my favorite biscuit again? Well, no. The obvious thing is to omit the sugar. And I do this, as I mentioned, for some of my clients in clinic because I know that they're just way too inflamed. And I need to bring that inflammation down, and I've got to do it like not now, but as near enough to. Okay, so do you go cold turkey and suffer? Do you, as I said, make yourself miserable? Yeah, these are all kinds of. It's very much kind of dependent on the individual. And like I said, for some people, I do that in clinic, but I can because that's where my research and my understanding will come into play for that particular individual because I will have known them by then. And then the other questions that will come up is how to do this and how to sustain it. And how do you know when you've kind of achieved a level, perhaps, that is good enough? And how far do you take it? Obviously, you want to optimize your nutrition. That's what I do, is about optimizing. You want to be the best form that you're in. Why would you want to give yourself, a kind of a dampened down version of yourself? It just doesn't make any sense. Going cold turkey is obviously unrealistic for the majority. And obviously, until you're working with someone, you won't know whether you should come off or not. I advise all people to do something to manage their sugar levels. There's just so much information out there that can help now. But you might be on the start of this journey thinking, I'm a sweet tooth, I can't cope, I need my sugar fix, I need my chocolate fix. And I hear you, I've been there, I've done it, and you want to probably look for something that's more achievable. But if you want to know what that is, I want you to stay tuned because I'm going for a short break when I'm going to sort of have a little bit of a break and think about what I'm going to tell you after the break. You can really think about this as a journey, or you can think about this as in a defeatist mode, because I know some people are going to really struggle. So stay tuned. I'm going to be back with you after the short break. So you're listening to me, Shazia, on the Nutrition Show on Unity FM 93.5 FM. Back with you shortly. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Nutrition Show. You're joining me, Shazia, on Unity FM 93.5 FM. Before the break, I was talking to you about sugar, what it does in the body in terms of its breakdown process, where it can be a problem, where it's being linked to in terms of health conditions. And I hope to kind of wrap things up in the next sort of 20 minutes or so, just kind of talking about what you can actually do from a practical level, because I think that's kind of where the benefit is going to come for listeners. And before I do that, I just want to remind everyone that this discussion is for general purposes only. It's for education and empowering people to look at how they can benefit their own health. It does not constitute medical advice in any shape or form. If you have any health problems or any concerns of any type related to what I'm talking about today or otherwise, please do seek advice from your own medical practitioner. Okay, so I went on a lot just before the break about sugars, and I think it's a topic that I'm really passionate about because I see so much improvement when people start to modify the way they utilize this particular macronutrient subtype, if you like. And, I've seen it in my own health as well. And, I'm still on that journey. I haven't got to where I want to be, but, a little bit at a time is always the best way. Okay. So as I mentioned before the break, going cold turkey is something that I recommend in clinic for people because, they really do need to kind of give it up, so to speak. They need to kind of cut the sugars out so that they're not going to get themselves even more inflamed. But then for the majority of us, as I mentioned, it's a gradual journey, and I get that. And getting rid of some of it is better than not doing anything at all. So I'm going to give you an example of a client I had recently, a lovely lady who was an asthma sufferer who came to me to help with controlling her asthma flare-ups. And she was using sugars in her tea and possibly getting it from other foods as well. So I suggested to her lots of different things about using alternatives, using, kind of kind of sugars that would be sort of not as detrimental as the ones that she was using. You're joining me, Shazia, on Unity FM 93.5 FM. Before the break, I was talking to you about sugar, what it does in the body in terms of its breakdown process, where it can be a problem, where it's being linked to in terms of health conditions. And I hope to kind of wrap things up in the next sort of 20 minutes or so, just kind of talking about what you can actually do from a practical level, because I think that's kind of where the benefit is going to come for listeners. And before I do that, I just want to remind everyone that this discussion is for general purposes only. It's for education and empowering people to look at how they can benefit their own health. It does not constitute medical advice in any shape or form. If you have any health problems or any concerns of any type related to what I'm talking about today or otherwise, please do seek advice from your own medical practitioner. Okay, so I went on a lot just before the break about sugars, and I think it's a topic that I'm really passionate about because I see so much improvement when people start to modify the way they utilize this particular macronutrient subtype, if you like. And, I've seen it in my own health as well. And, I'm still on that journey. I haven't got to where I want to be, but, a little bit at a time is always the best way. Okay, so as I mentioned before the break, going cold turkey is something that I recommend in clinic for people because, they really do need to kind of give it up, so to speak. They need to kind of cut the sugars out so that they're not going to get themselves even more inflamed. But then for the majority of us, as I mentioned, it's a gradual journey, and I get that, and getting rid of some of it is better than not doing anything at all. So I'm going to give you an example of a client I had recently, a lovely lady who was an asthma sufferer who came to me to help with controlling her asthma flare-ups. And she was using sugars in her tea and possibly getting it from other foods as well. So I suggested to her lots of different things about using alternatives, using, kind of sugars that would be sort of not as detrimental as the ones that she was using. And we tried to see if that worked. And she used to come back to me and say, look, I can't do this. I need my sugar. It doesn't taste the same. And I could understand that she was going to struggle with this. So we looked at ways and means to kind of help her cut the sugars down. So what we found out in the end, and I'm going to talk to you about the alternatives that I did try with her shortly. But what we did go for in the end was to get her to cut her sugar down by 1/4 teaspoon every few days. If it was longer, that was fine too. But it was just kind of wean her off that sugar bit by bit. And she found that she could do that. I can't remember what she actually got down to in the end, but I think it was it a teaspoon or 2 teaspoons? She actually cut down that sugar quite significantly. So that was how she did it. It wasn't the ideal, obviously, but it's a really good way to have done it because she's making progress. That's what mattered, that she was acknowledging that this was a problem and that she could actually do things within her means and within her capacity to benefit herself that worked for her and that she could hopefully sustain on a longer term basis. So that was what worked for her. So, that spoon that you use for your sugar in your tea, start to cut that down bit by bit. And you can choose your interval. Don't make it silly like a month apart or 2 months apart. Make it something short. Give it, a day or two is probably too short. Maybe give it a couple of days, 4 days, 5 days. If you're really struggling, give it a week. Again, these are just guidelines. These are nothing specific. And start to see if you can start to reduce those foods that are not going to be the best for you. Okay? Now, that's just an example of someone I worked with just recently. Now, what other things can you do? Don't add sugar to your food. Yeah, so like that tea example, don't add it. Look for alternatives. Yeah, so sugar leaches nutrients from your body. Okay, now I know when I was growing up, my dad used to use a sugar alternative, which I'm not going to mention, but we came to find out that was actually very, very, detrimental to health. So, like as I said, when you're researching those names of sugars, research the sugars that are out there as well. I'm going to talk about some of them today, very briefly. But there are things that you can use in the meantime while you're coming off sugars in general, the problematic ones anyway. Well, so it's you in effect substituting for sugars that are not as harmful. Okay, so you don't want to buy foods that have sugar in them. Again, being label literate, yeah, trying to kind of avoid them as much as you can. Now, this won't always be possible. Why? Because there are foods which are not sweet, which have sugar added to them. Okay, think about breads, think about tomato ketchup, a pre-made soup, baked beans. I was shocked with baked beans having sugar in them, and I used to get through like tins of the stuff when I was younger. Think about smoothies that are pre-made. Lots and lots of foods that are not necessarily sweet will have sugar in them. So again, becoming label literate is going to help you to avoid wherever you can foods that have got added sugar in them. Okay, so again, I'm not saying don't have your toast in the morning, don't do this and don't do that. Look for these foods. Go for the ones that are not necessarily laden with lots of ingredients. Go for the more natural forms. Some of these foods you can make at home. Some of these foods you can substitute with others, and really kind of focus on the foods that you can give up easily, that are not really giving you any nutrition. That's what I try to do with my clients. I don't try to make things hard for them. I look at what I can add first of all, and then what I can take away that's not going to really hurt them so much. Think about the general healthy eating plate. So I have talked about this, I believe, on a previous show, and that plate of yours should be half colorful vegetables, and you can add some fruits in there as well. So think about all your leafy vegetables in there, your greens, your rainbow colored salads. Every color you should be selecting from the rainbow, and you want to make that mainly non-starchy. Yeah, so this is where your kind of salady type things come in. So kind of have a look at what's around in the supermarket. Look at the radishes, look at the peppers, cucumbers, tomato, all these kinds of things that you can put into your salads. All the different types of green leaf salads, put those in, and that should maybe making up half of your plate. So can you see how already your sugar level, as in from the sources that are not suitable, has already gone down if that's half of your plate? Okay, and then your quarter, you're going to get your proteins in there, and then you can have your starchy carbs as well, and then you can add a little bit of healthy fats too. Okay, so not just sugars, fructose is one of them. You will find in fruit and veg, but they have a good balance. Remember, fruit and veg also have vitamins, minerals, and fibers. So although you're getting natural sugars from these items, these products, you're also getting the vitamins and minerals as well. So you're getting a combination of things. You're not just getting that sugar burst with nothing else beneficial. Okay, so when you've got that balanced plate, as I've just mentioned, that's offset. That doesn't do the same thing that donut's going to do, that slice of cake, that candy or whatever you're consuming otherwise. Okay, so this is what you're going to get in addition to those natural sugars, and this is going to be supporting your health. It's all supported because it's coming as a package in a natural way that your body can recognize. Okay, and this is what we need to help our body stay fit and healthy and prevent disease. You want to be careful with foods like the sugars actually in foods such as honey. Now, honey we know is medicinal, and when I talk about honey, I'm talking about the raw, pure stuff. This is kind of like the unfiltered, organic, the honey that's produced in a very kind of in a very controlled way. You don't want the refined sugary type of honey. You want the proper honey, and you'll know the difference when you've actually tasted it. You want to kind of get the benefits, but you want to be sensible because they're still sugar. Okay, so you don't want to be consuming like half a jar of honey every day. Consume it in moderation. Think of it as a medicine. Use it, benefit from it, but then obviously take note that these are sugars as well. Okay, if you're going to consume sugars, always go for the healthier version. So if you're having refined white sugar and you're going to soak that with honey, yes, that's a great option. But then again, be mindful that you're not going to go from one extreme to the other. Okay, and then you want to combine sugars from things like breads and things like that with proteins and fats, so that you're slowing that blood sugar roller coaster down. Okay, as I mentioned before, look at labels, because this is going to be your kind of real way forward in any of this, because it's going to help you to understand what foods have got sugars that are added to them. As I mentioned before, if you've got carbs coming up in red on a green on a traffic light, label, then you really need to look at where those carbs are coming from. Are they sugars? Are they starches? What's contributing to the sugar in your food? Okay, so as I mentioned before, this is not constituting any medical advice whatsoever. It's there for information for you to utilize, take away, put it on your list of things to do. Okay, so I mentioned a few bits already. I'm going to repeat some of this as well as I'm going along because it kind of fits into different categories. But start looking at auditing yourself. Look at where you are and where you want to be. Remember, you want to be the best that you can be for as long as you can be. That's kind of the goal everyone should really have for themselves. And you want even better for your kids, no doubt. I know my parents did. And you want to kind of have a goal, have milestones that you can reach every so often to kind of getting closer to this. Okay, so I've talked about honey. What about other sugar alternatives? You've got your date sugar, coconut sugar, maple syrup. I've tried all of these, they're amazing. Cane sugar. These are all, again, they're still sugars. However, they have benefits, but I would still say these in moderation. Okay, so you want to be mindful, again, as I mentioned for the honey, to utilize these foods. I mean, these examples weren't sort of medicinal, although they may have constituents in them that can support with health. But you want to try and use them in small quantities and when absolutely necessary. I know most people are not going to go cold turkey. And, once you actually come away from the sugar, you don't go back to it. That's what I find. If I had to put sugar in my tea now, I wouldn't drink it. I can't do it because my taste buds are like, oh no, this is not for me. I cannot go back. So that's a really good sign once you've actually done it long enough and when you've got to that stage. We're all different. We're not here to judge anyone. If you're there, great. If you're not there, work towards it. Okay, so what the easiest way to do it is look at the sugars that you don't want in your diet. Okay, so this is the refined stuff. So if you don't know what that means, please look it up. It's the refined stuff that we're all used to and we've always used. That's what you want to get away from. And you do that according to your body's means and needs. And you do that at a pace that's good for you. Like I say, if you need more advice on this kind of thing, you need to work with a nutritional professional. Obviously, speak to your doctor first. It's always good to get all of these people on board. We all work together. We don't work in isolation. It doesn't achieve anything. We're all kind of fighting, for your health. So, speak to someone before you start to make changes. And like I said, that's the problem. That's the main issue. And then you've also got artificial sweeteners, which are a problem as well. So a particular one is aspartame. Worth looking into the research on this one. From my perspective, I wouldn't consume it and I wouldn't advise anyone else to consume it either. Okay, so in terms of what you can utilize, I mentioned honey and those other nice, natural forms of sugars in tiny amounts when needed. You can also look for things like the herbal sweetener called stevia. Some people like it, some people don't. I know my last client didn't like it. Great option, very sweet. I found it, and it doesn't spike blood sugar levels, which is really good. And they're great. They're great options that you have whilst you're on your journey. That's what I want to kind of, make a point of. It's not about I start using alternatives and doing this and that, and because I'm so addicted to sugar. It's about finding, something that you can use whilst you're on this journey of substituting your foods for better options. Okay, so these are really good ways to kind of look at your intake of sugar, particularly from refined sources, from sources that don't really benefit, and finding a way to get yourself going whilst satisfying that sweet tooth that you may have. I didn't want to talk about it. I mean, it's kind of needless to say, but we all know the problems that sugar has in terms of dental health alone. I've suffered a lot with my dental health, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. If you can look after your teeth, you've done a really good job, and it's expensive as well. So you don't want to go there, extractions and fillings and root canals and all this kind of, it's mega painful and it's not worth that sugar fix at all. So, I used to have a lot of sweets when I was a kid and I loved them, but you do pay the price. So, if you're listening and, you're in your younger years in particular, look after your teeth. Honestly, it just pays dividends. It really does. So, like I said, the easiest thing that you can do is looking for these kind of interims, these swaps in some cases. So what can you try instead of, so pay attention, all of those of you who are kind of like thinking, okay, so what can I do instead, of my so and so chocolate bar, yeah, for example. So yeah, there's so many things that you can do. Recipes are just kind of plentiful online. You can like type in easy make healthy sweets, easy make healthy snacks. You just can't go wrong now with this. Some of them I used to go for the non-bake versions because I was super lazy, and they are so good. And you can make some of these things and freeze them. You can keep them in the fridge. Really, really good options. So you think about coconut or Greek yogurt with some fresh fruit. You can even add a little bit of good quality honey to that if you want a little bit of sweetness. If you're using fruits that aren't so sweet, or in place of those fruits, these are all options that you can try, mix and match. Try, a square of dark chocolate or cacao nibs, which tend to be bitter if you've not tried them before. And you can combine with these with a few almonds if you're tolerant to nuts. So the sweeter nuts will be nice to offset the dark chocolate or the cacao nibs, the bitterness. That works really well. It really is one of my favorites. Berries, cherries, fruits that are kind of in season at the time, utilize those. I mean, the berries tend to have a lower glycemic index, which means that they don't spike your blood sugar as much. I would still consume them with something, it's going to kind of slow that down. So whether it's a few nuts, a few seeds, something like that, something to kind of, kind of slow the whole thing down. Think about a healthy fat or a healthy protein to go with it, and it works really well. Homemade date balls or date bars. I mean, I've kind of, gone to workshops and shown people, how to make them. They're so easy. So if you've got some medjool dates or others at home, crush them up with some nuts and seeds and some protein powder, coconut, some chocolate powder. You want to mix it all up, and you can have one of those, in place of your regular chocolate bar. So easy to do. If you've got young kids, get them on board. Obviously, look at their ability. You don't want to put them in any danger of any sort, and make this a kind of a family kind of initiative. What can you have instead of? Swaps are always better than going cold turkey, especially when you're not that strong. You can do apples or other fruits with nut butter. So, again, providing you're not sensitive to any nuts, you can go for that. You can even do seed butters as well. There's just so much out there now that, it gets quite confusing what to go for. Frozen fruit are great. I keep them in the freezer to make smoothies with. Frozen fruit are great. They actually they even taste better than an ice all sometimes. So, if I'm having a bit of an ice cream kind of craving or ice all craving, I will have some frozen fruit. Really nice. Obviously, I wait till it kind of warms up a little bit to room temperature before I consume them because I've got sensitive teeth. But, that's an option that we all have. Think about grapes, bananas, berries. You can get almost anything frozen now. Mangoes. It's just the list is endless. Mix and match it up, change it up. So much that you can actually do. And you can even think about making homemade ice cream and ice lollies as well. Really easy to do. I mean, I know one that I made not long ago was just 3 ingredients. Again, mix and match them. Look at what you like. You can put chocolate chips in there if you like chocolate. Lots of different things that you can actually do at home. Okay, so if you felt overwhelmed with this show, then I can understand. I was there. I still feel like I'm there sometimes, and I see it in my clients as well. So think about the 80-20 rule. You want to do the best most of the time, and having those kind of days when you're not up for it, it's okay. But obviously, work within your circumstance. There will be times that you need to be more strict with yourself. That's where the encouragement is important. That's where building a connection is important. That's where you want to really make sure that you're reaching out for help. You don't want to be doing things on your own, particularly when things are more complex. You've got a lot going on. You need the additional support. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help. Okay? So what you want to try and do is prepare yourself, be in a place where you can read something and you can understand something. Be your own health advocate. No one's going to care for you the way you're going to care for yourself and your family. No one's going to do that. And, you want to be informed. When you're informed, you're able to make really good decisions. And we're all on a learning journey, so it doesn't matter how far you've got. The point is that you keep going once you make a start. Okay, so that's where you kind of want to be. So I've talked a lot today. I hope that something in there has benefited. It's been insightful. It's going to get you looking into what could work for you whilst you seek support from your own healthcare providers. Remember, this is not medical advice. This is just general tips and hints that you can incorporate. It's there to kind of make you think about the issues that are there that we're seeing as professionals. And I see even in a family setting, you want to kind of be able to say, right, I'm going to change this and I'm going to make it better. And it's about doing your bit, whatever that looks like. I would always like, as always, I love to hear your views. If you want to ring in and share your views, if you want to share something that's worked for you, I'd love to hear that, because that's kind of where the gold is, really. Because when it works and when you see the change, there's nothing more satisfying. So I'm really grateful to be able to connect with you again today. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you listening to me going on. I am quite passionate, so I do talk a lot. And I hope that the rest of your day goes well. So this is Shazia on the Nutrition Show on Unity FM, 93.5 FM. I look forward to joining you again and connecting with you in regards to more nutrition-related subjects. Take care until next time. Wassalamu alaikum.